According to Dr. John Sanford, a renowned American geneticist from Cornell University, humanity is experiencing what all of the natural world is experiencing: entropy, or when energy goes from an ordered state to disorder. He proposes that humans are experiencing what he calls genetic entropy, or the eroding of the genomes of all living organisms because mutations are inherited from one generation to the next. It is, in fact, driving humanity and all other higher organisms to the point of extinction as mutations build up in populations over time. What's really interesting is how the genealogies in Genesis suddenly start making a lot more sense once you realize that genetic entropy is a reality. Jacob, one of the patriarchs mentioned in Genesis, explicitly talks about how people used to live much longer in the past. He told Pharaoh in Genesis chapter 47, verse 9, "I have traveled this earth for 130 hard years, but my life has been short compared to the lives of my ancestors." In the early days, those ancient patriarchs from Adam to Moses were incredibly long-lived, and we can find records of their ages in several books of the Bible like Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua. It's truly fascinating to see that all of these early patriarchs lived to be very old. And it might surprise you, but we can actually treat these ages as real data and analyze them, even though we don't really look at the Bible as a scientific source. Dr. Sanford and his team analyzed this data, taking the first generations from Adam to Noah and plotting their ages, finding that most of them lived to be over 900 years old. The lifespans were pretty consistent during that time. Now, in modern times, it's hard for many people to believe that anyone could live that long. So, some Christians tend to dismiss these records as mere mythology. But here's the thing, the next part of the data is harder to brush off. Dr. Sanford looked at the lifespans of Noah and his descendants, and he noticed something significant. There's a sudden change in lifespans during Noah's time, followed by a consistent decline with each generation living shorter and shorter lives. This decline starts right around the time of the biblical flood. Dr. Sanford and his team want us to look at the statistical analysis of this plot, and he says it confirms the authenticity of the biblical data. Despite being sourced from different books written by different authors many years apart, the data remains coherent and internally consistent, which is highly unlikely to occur by chance. According to Dr. Sanford, anyone who has studied biological data can see how very, quote, tight the data is, meaning that the data points diverge very little from the trend line. The shape of the trend line, the smooth curve, explains 96% of the variation in the lifespan data. Another way to say this is that the lifespans are declining in a very mathematically precise manner. There are two possible explanations for this phenomenon. The first suggests that all of these data points, scattered throughout various Old Testament books, were fabricated by a cunning author with expertise in mathematics. This author would have aimed to deceive the world into believing in a dramatic and specific exponential decline in human fitness since the time of Noah. However, it does seem a bit irrational to believe that a mathematician would go to such lengths to fabricate numerous parts of the Old Testament solely to perpetuate this particular pattern of degeneration. Or the second explanation might be more reasonable, that the declining lifespans recorded in the Bible are genuine and accurately depict an historical degenerative process. His team states that it's illogical to dismiss the idea that all the relevant biblical accounts faithfully recorded true historical events and ages at death. The Old Testament reads like an unpretentious historical narrative, as if the authors were simply documenting history, and the long lives of the early patriarchs would have been widely recognized, obviously leading to systematic recording. Therefore, the challenge lies not with the Bible, but with our own disbelief.